The lights of New York City sparkled like stars imprisoned beneath the pavement. Amid the cold night and intoxicating scent of money and power, Julian Blackwell sat alone at the rooftop bar on the 55th floor of his flagship hotel. A crystal glass of aged whiskey swirled gently between his fingers. Calm, steady, yet his gaze remained distant, empty, as if searching for something even he couldn't name. As the CEO of one of the world's most prestigious luxury hotel chains, Julian had built his life on precision and control. Negotiations, billion-dollar acquisitions, and airtight schedules were his religion. Love? That was a weakness, long since eliminated from his life. And yet, tonight, something felt different. A strange stillness had settled inside his chest, a quiet discomfort he couldn't explain. He left his office without a destination, without a reason, just a need for distraction, for silence, for something he hadn't yet defined. Julian was dressed in a jet-black Armani couture suit tailored in Milan, paired with a white Tom Ford silk shirt that fit him like a second skin. On his wrist sat a platinum Patek Philippe watch, gleaming with quiet elegance. Every detail spoke of power, of class, of a man who never settled for less. But the most commanding thing about him wasn't the label. It was his eyes, cold, calculating, and unreadable. Then she walked in. Clara Bennett. A black dress hugged her body just enough to imply elegance, but nothing about her screamed for attention. The fabric was simple, affordable. Her hair was loosely pinned, a few strands falling like they had chosen their place. Her pale gray eyes scanned the room, calm but visibly misplaced. She didn't belong here, and that made her all the more captivating. Julian sat up. The slow swirl of his drink stopped. His icy gaze locked onto Clara, with the silent precision of a predator sensing something out of place. She wasn't like the women who usually circled him. Painted lips, sharp intentions, and designer perfumes masking insecurity. No, Clara carried weariness like a veil, quiet and unapologetic. She sat a few seats away at the bar. She didn't notice him, not yet. But he saw everything. The nervous twitch in her hands, the way she looked at the bartender like she didn't know what to ask for, the subtle weight on her shoulders. She was running. And for the first time in years, Julian wanted to know. From what? He rose from his seat, heads turned. His presence demanded attention, not because he asked for it, but because he wore command like a tailored jacket. Each step toward her was deliberate, smooth, inevitable. "You don't look like the type to drink alone in a place like this," he said. His voice was deep, velvet-laced, but beneath it ran an undercurrent sharp enough to draw blood. Clara blinked and looked up, startled. Their eyes met, and something shifted. For a second, neither spoke. The moment held, suspended in something far too dangerous to name. "And you," she said softly, "don't seem like the type who talks to strangers." Julian smiled. Just a tilt of the lips, but real. Rare. "Maybe tonight's different." He signaled the bartender. "What are you drinking?" Clara hesitated. "Something light, just a cocktail." Julian leaned slightly closer, never breaking eye contact. "Let me guess, you don't usually come to places like this." She nodded. "It's not really my scene." He leaned an elbow on the bar, body angled slightly toward hers. He was creating a bubble around them, whether she realized it or not. "So, what brought you here tonight?" Clara's expression softened, her eyes flickering away for the first time. "Sometimes you just need a different place, to forget where you are, or what you're running from." Julian didn't respond immediately. He heard the truth beneath her words, and it pulled at something buried deep inside him. He didn't know what she was running from, but he suddenly knew one thing for certain. He wanted her, not in the fleeting, meaningless way he usually wanted. This was different. Clara wasn't just a woman, she was a disruption. And Julian Blackwell had never craved anything more. Clara didn't know why she was still sitting there. She should have stood up, said thank you, and walked away after the first cocktail. But Julian Blackwell The man with eyes cold as steel and a presence that silenced the room had made it impossible. Not because he asked, but because, somehow, the way he looked at her made her feel seen. And that was something Clara hadn't felt in a long, long time. Their conversation continued as if time had folded in on itself. From casual questions to glimpses into their lives, neither said much, but the silence between them felt natural. Julian didn't push, didn't pry, but the way he listened pulled the truth out of her anyway. For the first time in months, she laughed. A real, unguarded laugh. "I should go," she whispered as midnight approached. Julian tilted his head. "To go back to the place you were running from?" That question wasn't curiosity. It was a quiet truth, pulled from thin air. Clara didn't answer. She simply looked at him, her soft gray eyes trembling. Julian leaned closer, voice low and calm. "Come with me." Clara's breath caught. It wasn't a command, but it left no space for refusal. He didn't force. He didn't need to. There was something in his tone that dissolved every wall she'd built. "Just one night," he said, his gaze never wavering. No pretending, no promises, no expectations. She should have said no. She always did, always kept her boundaries, always guarded her heart. But his eyes, his voice, the way he made her feel like she mattered, like she wasn't invisible, broke something open inside her. "Okay," she exhaled. The penthouse sat at the very top of the tower, flawless, luxurious, and lifeless. Everything in perfect order, everything expensive, and everything cold. Julian closed the door behind them, but he didn't touch her right away. He just stood there, watching her like a man debating whether to cross a line. Clara's heart pounded in her chest. Then he moved, and hand slid to her waist, pulling her gently against him. His breath was warm on her skin as he murmured, "You have no idea what you do to me, Clara." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. His kiss landed like a storm, deep, urgent, stealing every coherent thought from her mind. His hands roamed her body, lighting fire with every touch. Clara had never been kissed like this, had never been touched like she was the only thing that existed. Until his hand moved lower, where no one had ever been. She flinched. Julian froze. He pulled back immediately, reading her face, his desire pausing, but not disappearing. "Clara?" he asked, voice husky but impossibly gentle. She bit her lip. Her cheeks turned red. "I've never," she whispered. Silence fell. Julian blinked, as if the revelation reset something inside him. "You're She nodded. Eyes lowered. She braced for him to pull away, for disappointment. But instead, something darker ignited in his gaze. Something deeper. Possession. "You should have told me," he said quietly, cupping her face with a reverence that made her tremble. "I thought it didn't matter," she said softly. "It matters more than you think." He brushed her lower lip with his thumb. "I need you, Clara. But only if you're sure." She looked up, and what she saw in his eyes wasn't lust. It was fire, raw, fierce, real. "I'm sure," she whispered. That was all it took. At night, Julian didn't just take her. He worshipped her, touched her like she was fragile and sacred, kissed her like she was his salvation. It was slow, deliberate, relentless. Clara didn't know love could ache like this, or feel this warm. And when morning came, and she lay tangled in his sheets, his lips against her temple, his voice dropped one last promise into her skin. "I won't stop at just one night, Clara. I need more." Julian Blackwell didn't sleep. He lay there, wide awake, his arm wrapped tightly around Clara's sleeping body, as if the moment he let go, she would vanish. No one had ever touched him like this. No one had ever made him lose control like this. He felt it, crystal clear. Something inside him was shifting, her breath against his skin, the warmth of her body in his arms. This wasn't lust anymore. This was need, instinct, something dark and dangerous that only awakened when a man like Julian wanted to keep what he had claimed. And Clara belonged to him. When she stirred in her sleep and mumbled his name, Julian clenched his jaw. He had everything, but never had he feared losing something, someone, so deeply. By morning, she slipped out quietly, thinking he was asleep. He let her go, not because he wanted to, but because he needed to know if she'd come back. Clara returned to her tiny apartment in Brooklyn, shared with a roommate who worked nights. The stack of unpaid bills still sat on the kitchen table, electric, rent, water, mocking her like cruel reminders that dreams didn't last. She dropped her purse and let out a long breath. She had fallen into something she couldn't control. Julian Blackwell. She couldn't shake the image of his eyes looking at her like she was the only thing that mattered in his frozen world, and that terrified her. She didn't belong in his world. She didn't belong to him. Julian sat behind the glass walls of his office, towering above the city he ruled. But his mind wasn't there. It was in a small apartment in Brooklyn, with a girl who had gray eyes and trembling lips and no idea what she had done to him. He knew she thought last night was just that, a single night, that she could leave, that he would forget. She was wrong. He picked up his phone and dialed without hesitation. "Melissa," he said coolly. His assistant's voice came on instantly. "Yes, Mr. Blackwell? I want everything on Clara Bennett. Address, employment, financial history, the full picture." "Right away, sir." He hung up. She needed protecting. She needed out of that life, and he would be the one to do it, no matter what it took. Clara stood outside her building, keys in hand, when her phone buzzed. "Julian, you didn't call." Her heart clenched. She hadn't expected that. She thought he'd stay silent, that he'd forget. But no. One message, short, cold, and her hands were trembling. "Clara, I didn't think you wanted me to." His reply was almost instant. "Julian, I told you, I want more than one night." She stared at the words, unable to move. That wasn't a request. It was a declaration. Before she could type anything else, her phone rang. She froze, then answered. "Hello?" His voice wrapped around her like silk and steel. "Why are you hesitating?" She swallowed hard. I don't know what this is, Julian. I don't know what you want from me." Silence. Then his voice, low, resolute, dangerous. "I want you. And I don't share." Her breath caught. "Where are you?" "I just got home." "Good, stay there." Click, the line went dead. Clara stood frozen. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb seconds later. A man in a dark suit stepped out, walking toward her with purpose. "Miss Clara Bennett?" "Yes." "Mr. Blackwell sent me. The car is waiting." She looked at the car, then at the man. Her heart didn't know whether to panic or hope. Clara sat frozen in the back of the sleek black car, her fingers gripping the hem of her dress like it was the only thing anchoring her to reality. The interior smelled of rich leather, oak wood, and expensive cologne, every inch of it foreign, intimidating. Each street they passed, each second that ticked by, brought her closer to the one man she had no business seeing again. Julian Blackwell. She didn't know what made her get in the car. Was it curiosity? Desire? Or the terrifying loss of control that came every time he looked at her? The car stopped. The driver opened the door without a word. Clara stepped out, her heels clicking against the cold marble floors of Blackwell International's main lobby. Everything here screamed silence and power. The glossy floors, the clinical lighting, the heavy weight in the air. Clara entered the elevator, her pulse pounding, breath shallow, until the doors slid open on the top floor. Julian was waiting, leaning against the edge of a glass desk. His white shirt sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, the top buttons undone, his black tie thrown carelessly over his shoulder like patience had long run out. Before she could speak, he was already moving. One step and he was in front of her, one hand wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him, his breath hot at her ear. "I told you, I don't like waiting." Clara gasped. "Julian, He didn't let her finish. His mouth crashed against hers, urgent, claiming, unrelenting. Her body melted against his like it always did. His hand on her back was firm, possessive, like he'd finally retrieved something that had been stolen. When he pulled away, his eyes were locked on hers. "Did you really think I'd let you walk away?" His voice was low, rough. "Julian, this is happening so fast." His gaze darkened. "Not fast enough." He pressed his forehead to hers, his lips brushing her skin. "You're mine, Clara. Say it." She shook her head weakly, but didn't move away. "Julian, I don't know if I—" His hand framed her face, eyes blazing. "Then let me know for you." The kiss that followed wasn't a request. It was a vow, a declaration, the promise of a man who had never asked for anything, until now. Neither of them remembered how they moved from the office to the private lounge in the back. Julian's hidden sanctuary, far from prying eyes. Clara sank into the leather chair, Julian towering over her like a flame threatening to consume. Every time his lips touched her skin, she trembled. "I thought I could be patient," he whispered, his voice thick with longing, "but I can't. I need you." Clara no longer fought it. No more resistance. She surrendered. Not just her body, but everything. He lifted her like she was breakable, kissed her like every second mattered, touched her like she was sacred. In his arms, the fear faded, the confusion dissolved. There was only them, a man who ruled empires and a girl who didn't know her heart had already been taken. When it was over, when breathless whispers turned into silence and sweat glistened against skin, Julian held Clara tightly, his face buried in the crook of her neck. Then came the words, "Move in with me." Clara sat up. "What?" Julian lifted his head. His eyes left no room for misunderstanding. "I don't want you going back there. I don't want you fighting to survive. You belong here, with me." "Julian, I have a job, a life. Nothing in that life matters more than you being safe and with me." She looked at him, torn. "I'm not ready." Julian touched her chin, forced her eyes to meet his. "Then let me make you ready." Clara left Julian's penthouse the next morning, her heart heavy. He hadn't stopped her. No threats, no pleas. But the silence he left behind felt louder than words, like she'd just walked away from something that wouldn't be there if she looked back. On the train ride back to Brooklyn, Clara tried to remind herself she needed space, that Julian's world was too foreign, too dangerous, that whatever she felt was a trick of chemistry and heat. But when she opened the door to her cramped apartment, saw the scattered bills and the half-empty fridge, her resolve began to crack. Julian wasn't just a man. He was a different life, one where she didn't have to choose between medicine and rent, one where fear didn't weigh down every breath. 3 days passed, no calls, no texts. Clara wondered, had he given up? Was he angry because she'd turned down his offer to move in? She went back to work at the flower shop. Same tulips, same couples, same routines. Until the morning she opened the shop door and found something waiting at the counter. A bouquet of deep red roses. No card, just a single handwritten note. "I don't share, Shay." Clara clutched the note, her pulse pounding. She called him that evening. "Julian, you called." His voice was low, measured, like he'd been waiting. "You sent the roses? You didn't say you didn't like them." "Why now?" she asked softly. 3 days of silence, and then this? He paused. Then, "Because I needed you to know I'm still here, even when you try to run." Clara closed her eyes. "I don't know what I'm walking into, Julian. I've never belonged to a world like yours. It's not the world, it's the man. You belong to me." His words were both promise and command. Julian sent a car the next night. No questions, no request. Just a message, 6 p.m., be outside. I'll be there. Clara almost didn't go, but she did, because something inside her had stopped wanting to resist. Dinner took place in a hidden restaurant with no name one only people in Julian's world could access. He sat across from her, never breaking eye contact. "Do you know," he said as their wine glasses were filled, how hard it was not to show up at your door. "You're being controlling, Julian," Clara said quietly. "This isn't caring anymore." "I don't deny it," he replied calmly. "I want to control everything that touches you, because I don't take chances when it comes to losing you." She was silent. His honesty was terrifying. "Clara," he said, his voice softer now, "this isn't about owning a woman. This is about you, about how you make me forget everything, except you." Her chest tightened. Was that truth? Or just a powerful man's way of naming his selfishness? "I need time," she whispered. Julian looked at her like he could see every word she hadn't said. "Then let me be beside you while you decide." Clara didn't know what made her stay after that dinner. Nobody, it was Julian's eyes. Not cold like before, but quietly desperate, as if he was trying to fight himself so he wouldn't scare her away. Maybe it was the words he left her with. "Let me be beside you while you decide." Whatever the reason, she didn't walk away, and Julian didn't chase. Instead, he did something she never expected from him. He waited. The days that followed were filled with a strange kind of silence. Not complete, not cold. He still texted, sent flowers, asked about her work, sometimes just to say he missed her. But he never mentioned moving in again. Clara finally felt like she could breathe, and because of that, she began to see Julian differently. He wasn't perfect. He was powerful, sometimes overbearing, and often intense. But he was also the only man who had ever truly seen her, respected her, protected her. She began to look forward to his messages, the quiet nights staring at her phone, the way he'd show up unexpectedly with a bouquet of lavender, pressing a kiss to her forehead like a silent ritual only they understood. A month later, Julian invited her to the biggest charity gala of the year, hosted by Blackwell International. Clara hesitated. She wasn't used to ball gowns, camera flashes, or whispered judgments. But Julian simply looked at her and said, "You don't have to be anyone else. Just be you." So she went. The dress was sent to her apartment the night before, designed specifically for her by Julian's private tailor. Pearl silver silk, minimalist and elegant, just like her. When she stepped out of the car and took Julian's hand, he, in a perfectly tailored Tom Ford tuxedo, eyes fixed on her like she was the only thing that existed, Clara didn't feel out of place. Not because of the lights, not because of the wealth, but because of his hand wrapped around hers, sure and unwavering. The event took place at the city's fine art museum. High ceilings, flickering candlelight reflected off priceless paintings, voices blending into a hum of elegance. Clara stood among a crowd of socialites and billionaires, but didn't feel afraid. Julian never left her side, every look, every touch on her lower back reminding her, "You are not alone." When the music changed to a slow waltz, he extended his hand. She laughed softly, placing hers in his. "It's my first time wearing a ball gown," she whispered. "It's my first time bringing someone to this." "Why me?" Julian tilted his head. "Because I've never wanted anyone else with me in moments like this." She didn't answer, but something inside her heart changed. When the gala ended, Julian didn't take her home. He took her somewhere else, quiet, hidden, far from the city lights. A private garden behind an old stone building, strung with golden fairy lights between olive trees, warm and glowing. "Julian, where are we?" "A place where I'm going to say the most important thing I've ever said." He turned around and Clara saw something she never thought she'd see in him: nervousness. He, always composed, always in control, walked toward her with hesitation in his eyes. From his pocket, he pulled a small black box and opened it. Inside was a ring, simple design, a clear emerald-cut diamond on a brushed white gold band. "I used to think I'd never believe in marriage," he began, his voice low. "I've seen too much of it built on lies, on money, power, or desperation. But then you came and ruined every rule I thought I knew." Clara froze. "I can't promise I'll be easy to love. I'll still be controlling, still overprotective, still impossible sometimes." He dropped to one knee. "But if you let me, I'll spend the rest of my life loving you, protecting you, and making sure you never feel small in any room ever again." Clara stood still, stunned. Clara Bennett. Marry me. 1 month after the proposal, the city of New York held its breath as Blackwell International made the announcement. Julian Blackwell, America's most powerful man, was getting married. No one knew who the woman was. They only saw her on a few magazine covers. Soft smile, pale gray eyes, standing quietly next to Julian, as if the world outside didn't matter. The wedding was held at New York's most luxurious hotel, Julian's flagship property, where every corner was adorned with white flowers and warm amber light like a golden sunset. The press was barred from the gates, no cameras, no chaos, only those who truly mattered. Inside the grand ballroom, a live orchestra played softly as the chapel doors opened. Clara appeared, dressed in a custom Elie Saab gown, holding a bouquet of white lilies, her hair swept into a low chignon, her eyes shimmering like early morning frost. She walked down the aisle, lined with the world's most powerful figures, each rising to their feet in reverent silence. But she only saw one man, Julian. He stood at the altar, wearing a timeless black tuxedo, his eyes never leaving hers. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. His gaze alone made Clara tremble. As she reached him, Julian extended his hand. She placed hers in his. Warm, steady, familiar. The officiant began to speak. But for Clara, the world faded. There was only Julian. His breath, his eyes, his vows that would change everything. "I vow," Julian said, his voice deep and unwavering, "to love you, protect you, and fight for you, even when you can no longer fight for yourself." Clara gripped his hand, tears shining in her eyes. "I vow," she whispered, her voice shaking, "to stay by your side, not just when you're strong, but when you're broken. I vow to love you, even the parts you don't love about yourself." The officiant smiled. "By the power of love, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Julian leaned in. Their kiss was long and quiet, wrapped in a soft wave of applause, not loud, not showy, but reverent, as if the world had paused to witness something sacred. Wedding night, Clara stood by the tall windows, the city lights glowing below. Her wedding dress had been replaced by a silk robe, her hair now down, cascading like velvet over her shoulders. Julian came up behind her, arms circling her waist. "My wife," he murmured against her neck. Clara smiled, tilting her head to him. "It still doesn't feel real. It's the only thing that's ever felt real to me." He turned her around, his lips brushing hers, soft but burning with something deeper. In Julian's arms, she was no longer the girl from Brooklyn. She was Clara Blackwell, his woman, his choice, the one who made his heart beat differently. They made love, not rushed, not frantic, but slow, deliberate, like every movement was a sacred promise. Julian whispered love into her skin, every kiss a silent vow. And when they lay together, tangled and breathless, he held her close, wrapping her in the warmth of his chest. "Clara," he whispered into her ear, voice trembling like wind, "forever, you are mine."